Hi, it's the Althea Show, and today's topic today is how to not raise a spoiled child. I was a spoiled child, I'll say. I felt like I had, I felt like good about my kid life, and I felt like my parents did their best to make sure I had what I want. I didn't get everything I want, and what I didn't get in stuff, I got lots of confidence building from them. They were like, when you go out, you're the best kid ever kind of vibe. So they really boosted me up, and I believed them. So I was able to deal with a lot of issues. I mean, I was able to let light little teenage and young people issues roll over my back. It was no big deal. I was able to conquer it and move on. But yeah, being, confidence is one thing, but I was a spoiled brat, and that's the main part of it. So in some of that, I've decided that I didn't want to have to raise my children in the same fashion. Not that my parents did anything wrong, but there was some issues that they probably, felt that, if your parents grew up and they weren't able to give them, maybe they didn't get everything they wanted as kids. Because my parents were in that age group that, they started off with a struggle, and, so when they were kids, they probably just said, you know what, I'm not going to have my kids ever live like this or have lack or whatever. And that's great, and I give them a lot of praise and honor for that, because that was beautiful. It was such a gift. So I do know that there has to be a balance, though. Because in that, sometimes people do give because that's their way of showing love, If we look at the gifts giving, that book, the 5 languages of love, sometimes you need gifts to feel like you're something special, and people just flock to that. But for me personally, I needed to have some balance for my kids so that they wouldn't grow up to be little monsters like I was, because my little spoiled mind was just constantly reeling, and probably a little dash of manipulation in there was probably a nice little soup for my parents to get me whatever I wanted. So for me to know that I have to block all of that out, I had to figure things out, because I didn't want my kids, like I said, to grow up with that kind of thinking, because like I said, we don't want grown-up people behaving like spoiled 5-year-olds, but unfortunately we do, and it's quite comical, but we still have to walk through life and be grown-ups. So what I do right now what I did a long time ago is I tried to make sure that my kids learned how to deal with the word no. Even if I was able to give them something, I wanted them to at least try to earn it. It wasn't just handed to them right off the bat. We did do that in the very baby beginnings, and it was good, but it was a struggle even for me and my husband. We're like, okay, we give them all this stuff, and then they just throw it away, and they don't even appreciate it. So we got to the point where we smartened up and said, okay, now if they want something, they're going to have to really earn it, or they're going to really have to work hard for something, do something good, or behave well. Because, with toddlers, it's not like they're earning any grades or doing anything super intense, but you just want them to behave good, do what they're supposed to do what mommy and daddy tells you to do. So with that, we had to explain to the grandparents, and this is no dig to my kids' grandparents, but you do have to let them know that they have to kind of listen to the parents when it comes to the gift giving also. And it might have drove them a little bit crazy, because we kind of wanted to control that too. But when you don't want to be in competition with the grandparents, and because unfortunately the grandparents have maybe a little bit more money to spend, and you're still trying to just pay your bills and make sure food is in the cabinet, if you're still going through the extreme phases of parenting and living life. I mean, going through the day-to-day living, cost of living, and everything that comes along with it. So grandparents have a little bit extra, and you don't want to offend them, but you also want to make a stance that says, listen, kids have all that they need. If you want to bless them, that's fine, but you give them selective things. Like here, my mom, she would always buy them school shoes. That was like a blessing to me, and it was something like you don't have to go to Toys R Us to go and get them, and it wasn't like another thing that's sitting on a shelf that's just collecting dust. Because, you know, in all reality, you don't want your grandparents to be buying stuff, and you know that in the future they're going to need it for themselves. You know, you don't want them wasting their money and stuff like that. And it's just, well, that for me personally was a bother. I didn't want them to go crazy, and then eventually, you know, one day, like when you're old, I did not want my mom to have to eat cat food. That's the way I see it. I want her to do it at a slow pace. I want her to be able to financially support herself, and I don't want my kids to be eating away her savings. So for me personally, all the frivolous spending that kids will want 1 minute, and then the next minute, you know, they may or may not. The other things that I used to make them see is like gratitude for it would help them not see that they necessarily need what they have. I mean, because there's a lot of kids out there that have everything given to them, and they're still just as sad as and unfortunate as they can possibly be, because there's something on the inside that they're not fulfilling. I would try to make my kids see that there's lack in other people's lives, and they still can function, and they're just as happy as anybody else. It's just not stuff that makes them complete. And so that's one thing that I wanted to make them understand, that just because you might get the nicest and the newest, and this is the fanciest, and you have the prettiest, and this is the sparkliest, and this is the most latest, trendiest thing, and it's just not about that. When it all boils down, and when you're out of kindergarten through high school and you get into the real world, you don't realize whether, I mean, maybe for some it feels different on their special expensive shoes than it did with high-end shoes or something on that level. But for me personally, it doesn't make me feel any better when I'm walking in a $2 flip-flop than it is a expensive shoe. You know, it really doesn't make much difference. I don't feel more confident. It's just about how comfortable I feel and what's on the inside of me. Yeah. So I had to learn to just take myself down a couple of notches with my own thinking when it comes to being a spoiled kid. Because like I said, I didn't want to have super temper tantrums as a grown-up. That would make me look very crazy and childish. So I had to realize that, you know, I can't have everything, and everything can't be handed to me on a silver platter, and the world is not going to agree with me every word that I say, and if my opinion is not considered, I'm going to freak out or lose it. You know, it's just about learning to just take it and just keep on going. Temper tantrums, when it's like a spoiled moment and you got a kid who's just like freaking out and saying, I want it now. My mom, she did a really good idea. One time I had like a freak out moment when I was in our local mall, and I freaked out so bad. I was just like, I think I was probably about five or six maybe. And I remember she was like, okay, you want it so bad. And I was having a fallout, meltdown kind of vibe. And she just got up, walked away. I think I was like in the parking lot. And I was left at like the entrance of the store. And she just got in her car and left. And I was just standing there like, whoa, I can't do this anymore. This is not cool. And it was a moment that I remember to this day, but it was very, very good. That will definitely break out the spoiled, fallout, temper tantrum, I'm gonna melt and die if I don't get what I want kind of vibe. I mean, it worked. So just keep pressing on, keep your kids stable. Make sure that you are not afraid to say no. Your kids will be fine. Don't feel guilty if you can't. Don't feel guilty if you can and you just don't feel like it. I mean, your kids are very, very, very flexible. They can pretty much deal with a lot of stuff, unfortunately. And in our good parenting and even in our bad parenting, they can let that bounce off. But just allow yourself to raise a kid that's just confident in themselves and not necessarily in the stuff they get. Because in all reality, my kids would appreciate a hug more than a diamond ring or anything fancy. It's just about those loving moments and those times that you spend, those memories of love, those times that you boost them up when they're feeling down. That's what you need to be giving them more than anything. That's a good spoiled kid, is when you have a mommy or a daddy or a grandma that's coming in and filling their days with happiness and love.